Hi, this is your friendly Lemmy Nation School librarian here to talk with you about primary sources, secondary sources, and citation of those sources, and also show you a few pretty cool places to find primary and secondary sources. Okay, let's get started. So we're starting here at our Lemmy Nation School library page, and we're just going to look at a few of the places that you can go from here to find some pretty cool primary sources. And from here, you would go to the Whatcom County Library digital resources. All of these are free resources, and they're super helpful. So they have changed the way that this page looks. And if you want to look at the way the page looks that that you're familiar with, that we've used before, you can click here. I, however, am going to be adventurous and just look at the new page because they probably had a pretty good reason for changing it. So I'm going to take you to a place that we've probably gone before, and that is the ProQuest, which is a database, a whole bunch of stuff in one place, the History Study Center. So let's click there. And we're going to click one more time. Next, you to enter your identification. Just remember it's LN for Lemmy Nation or lunch number and your lunch number, and then everybody's PIN is the same, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so let's start by looking for some primary sources. And I'm sure that you have watched the video that talks about the difference between primary and secondary sources. And we are going to do an advanced search rather than a basic search. And we are going to look at Andrew Jackson, who was a president. And we are going to look for his policy on Indians. And this president is responsible for ultimately something called the Indian Removal Act. And but I think that the speech that we're looking for was prior to actually coming up with that act. He was trying to develop a policy. How can the white people take all of the land? There has to be a governmental policy, a plan in order to do that. So this is the sort of what I'm looking for is the original source, the very first speech he made to Congress, talking about how he was going to put into law how the white people could take somebody else's land, the native land. And I don't want all the resources here. I really just want to limit it to historical documents. So let's see what we find. Okay, so let's look at this, Andrew Jackson's Indian policy. And we're going to scroll down. This is going to tell us a little bit about the policy, and I can read this later. But look at this, first annual message, December 8th, 1829. And I'm going to go to the bottom and look, and this is the speech you can see made by Andrew Jackson in 1829. So this is what is called a primary source. I can read this and see what he said myself. It will be very interesting to look at secondary sources also about this speech and see what other people at the time and now have said about this speech. But first, I want to read this speech and see what he says for myself. And therefore, this is a primary source. So when you're using sources, primary or secondary sources, or you're going to quote from another, from what somebody else said, or you want to refer to what somebody else said or did, you're going to want to do what's called citing your source. And that's just letting the people know who read your work or watch your video or whatever you're making, where you got that information, right? So I put in this collection a link to Zotero Bib, which is a really cool citation maker. But you can also typically get your citations done on the site where you are. And right here, you look for often it has these big quotation marks, and then you just click cite this. And this is going to give you the citation. And you can now pick this up, the citation up, and you can put it into your work cited. If you cite one, it's one work. And if you cite more than one, it is works cited. And so here you go. You have the name of the speech, Andrew Jackson's Indian Policy. You have where it was from inside American History. This is the publication, 2007. Here's the website. And then it should also give us the date that we accessed it. So I might add that. And if I want to edit my citation, I can go ahead and make it a little more complete. Okay, so it does have the date of access in there. So that's a really good thing to make sure. So then you can just pick that up, copy and paste that into your works cited page. Here's another great resource to find primary sources. The National Museum of the American Indian. I highly recommend that you spend some time looking through this. It's fascinating. Everything is a primary source on it, basically. So this is something that you can scroll through on your own time. And I did just Google this. I mean, I knew about the museum, and so I just put the name of the museum into Google, and that's how I got here. And I would like to explore some of the links that they have. And one of the exhibits that they have that's been going on for quite some time and is through 2021 is this Nation to Nation site. And it's treaties examining the actual primary source treaty between these nations and the United States. And so I will draw your attention to the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854, which preceded the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. And that has to do with fishing in the Pacific Northwest and the Great Lakes. But of course, for us, we are most interested in the Pacific Northwest and the Coast Salish. And what's really interesting is you can actually open it up and you can read this treaty yourself. And it was printed by the government in 1904. So that's when it was printed. So it might be easier to read in this format, but actually looking at the original source document, you can do that right here. And now I'm going to look for a citation, a place to cite this source. And I don't see any right here. Here is Zotero Bib, and you can try to cite it. You can try to cite that primary source through here, but what I would do is I would click here and I would do the manual entry. Another place to get really great primary sources are museums. Museums are full of primary sources, and the Burke Museum in Seattle is a really interesting place to visit. Obviously, because of the situation we're in right now with our response to COVID, they have changed their website a little bit. So I'm going to take you to this page, which is, they have some of their exhibits online. So you can look at videos. I wanted to draw your attention to this down here, where you can actually listen to
hunting canoe, Stuchwich.
And so this really gets to this idea of how can we cite primary sources through your own culture, right? For somebody like me, I would go to the Burke Museum and find these primary sources. Also, the Whatcom County Museum has some great primary sources regarding Coast Salish culture. So the Whatcom County Museum and their current exhibitions are right here. And again, I just went to whatcomcountymuseum.org, and then their current exhibitions. And I'm going to scroll down to People of the Sea and Cedar, A Journey Through Tribal Cultures and History of the Northwest Coast. Here we go. These pictures, I think, are interesting. They're interesting because of the artifacts that are there. And they're interesting also when you look at the people that are there looking at the artifacts. So for you, this is your culture. This is something that you've grown up with. This is something that you actually have firsthand knowledge of in a way that these people will never have, obviously. And you also have access to a primary source in your elders. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about, we've talked a little bit about different types of citations, but I wanted to talk a little bit about how to cite an interview, how to cite an oral source. So when you're doing any citations, you want to know if you're going to be doing what type of citation. Will it be MLA, Chicago, APA? There's a lot of different types of citations. And you can check and see, you can actually walk through, primary sources from a book, primary online, primary source library, and you can figure it out this way, or you can go to YouTube, our friend YouTube. So this person, Carly Cal, has done some really good videos on how to cite primary sources, secondary sources, components of a citation, etc. And we're going to go here, which is sort of right in the middle. And I'm just going to make this a little bigger, and then I'm going to play you a little bit of this and show you. Obviously, it's a little blurry and it's hard for you to see, but her presentation is really clean and really good. And what she's talking about right here is an oral history interview and how to cite that. Think about going to your elders, going to your family members, and interviewing them, asking them questions about their experience in their life, and utilizing that in some of your research projects.
Now I'm looking for a primary source citation, and oral histories are interesting because there's a lot of components to an oral history citation. You want to start off with the interviewer, the person that formed the questions, the one who is doing the asking. So in this case, it's James Smither, PhD. So you put James Smither. He's he's interviewing Helen LaCamera. Okay, so we have the author, the person who put the interview together. We have what it is. Again, we're talking about the piece components of our citation. It is an interview. If you want, you can put oral history interview, because that is part of what this is.
So, and if you were doing the interview, obviously you could put your own name as the interviewer. So we're going to leave this right now, and I'm going to put some of her videos into the collection that I'm making. But she's a great resource, and also you can always check and make sure you're doing it right by using a citation guide yourself. I kind of like watching the video and then just following along, but you can do it however you see fit. So remember, this is the collection that I'm making for you right now, which I'm adding a few more things before it's done. But I just want to remind you that a primary source can be pretty much anything if it's direct. So if you're doing a poem, if you're doing a research paper about the Black Lives Matter movement, for example, and you have a poem that you think addresses that situation, that poem can be a primary source.
Honestly, it's blasphemy. How to use our God-given gifts and say dance for me. What's a token to the very man if they let us sink eventually? Stop treating our public schools like public bathrooms, like you can't wipe away the tears because it might be lead in it. I know what my potential is, and I know what theirs is too. What bootstraps if I'm never given any shoes? Do you hear me?
So this is a poet named Mecca Verdell, and this is from the website, the NEA website. But that's a pretty powerful poem. It's short, and that is a primary source. All right, thanks. Let me know if you have any questions. Come to the library and ask me. Okay, bye.